Happy Monday, my friends. Thad Riley here, episode number 326 of the Thadcast, December 14th. It's a rainy December here in New Hampshire. Sounds like, is that a Counting Crow song? Rainy December? I'll look it up afterwards. I think it's, Long December, and the Counting Crows, they have the Rain King. There we go. I'm combining my Counting Crows song. By the way, August and Everything After by the Counting Crows. One of the all-time greatest albums, period, end of story. In fact, it was released within, I think, 2 years of the greatest album of all time. So my two favorite of all time were released within like a year or two of each other, which is U2's Achtung Baby. Yeah, so not talking about any of that today here on the Thadcast. We're going to talk a little bit about motivation and faith driving that motivation. So in 2009, April 14th of 2009, I went for my first run as an adult. I'd never been on a run that I could remember of since I was maybe in college, if you can imagine. So outside of maybe playing a few games of basketball, maybe I'd been on the elliptical or a bike a couple times, but I don't think I had done any cardio in maybe about 12 to 15 years. How crazy is that? I hadn't done any type of deliberate cardio in that long. Hence, I weighed about 300, almost 370 pounds. In fact, my height, my peak of weight, I think it reached close to 390 at one point. It was quite a trip. I was like a size 58 pant, if you can imagine. And buying clothes back then was half the problem. Hey, shout out to Walmart, who has like all kinds of sizes and stuff. They got like those George Foreman big and tall stuff there going on for folks who need it. But I'm telling you right now, I used to have to spend like $7 million on a pair of socks. No, you wear normal socks, but you know what I mean. Like pants, t-shirts, everything was way jacked up in price because they could do it because there was no real competition. And so being that big for that long, I was that heavy for probably about 12, 13, 14, 15 years. And it was really, it's burdensome on your body. And things happen. I think two of the worst things that I remember happening was, first of all, kitchen chairs. I had a couple of those chairs break on me. And anytime you have a chair break on you when you sit down, you never trust a chair again. I'd go into restaurants, I'd be like, oh, y'all got a booth? But the problem with the booth was I was so big I couldn't really fit in the booth. So I had I wanted to sit in the chair, but I never trusted the chair. And I remember that it was always this feeling of shame that I didn't have this faith in a stupid chair. It was always this feeling of like, I wish, I feel like everybody's looking at me because I'm this big and I'm trying to sit in this little chair. It's a very awkward and hard way to live your life. And people don't really understand how difficult it can actually be to live your life in this type of a manner. It's really not an easy thing. And so if you do this for a decade or so, you live in the land of morbidly obese, your thinking changes, and you'll try things. So you'll try things because this is the age of technology, and we're always told to do a new thing or try this and this will work, and we're bombarded with all these messages. And I tried all kinds of different diets and plans, and nothing worked. Nothing was working. And then until the day I made up my mind. It was a mental decision that I made. And I just decided that I was going to do this thing. And I was going to eat healthy. And I studied and I researched like crazy. I set a calorie goal. I set all these like different things that I was going to do. And I was going to run. And I wasn't just going to run. I was going to do this running thing every single day. Now, I don't advise for the sake of your body that you run every day. Okay? But I was going to run every single day. That was my entire plan, and it actually worked. I ran every day for 6 months, and I ended up losing like over 100 pounds in that 6 month period of time. I think like 120 back then. And since then, I've lost a total of 150. I've gained a little during COVID, for the record, and I'm not going to tell you how much. It's not horrible, but I'm good. So I lost all this weight, and I was motivated by this belief that my children needed a dad who was going to be alive. That was number one. That was it. And number two was I could have a better existence than I was currently living. I wasn't living a very good story. And I have found that a lot of us today aren't living very good stories because we're not motivated and we don't have a faith that motivates us to move forward and do new things, or to do the things that we're doing at a higher level, or to achieve more, or just to be more compassionate. I don't know, a better friend. We're not motivated. We're not driven. We don't think about these things to inspire us and move us forward quite in the same way. And so we can look back at the scriptures as always for a source of inspiration. And I think we find it today in Matthew 2 through the story of the wise men. The wise men who have journeyed hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles to get there. We don't know exactly where the wise men were from. We do know they were from a distant land and they had traveled very far. And they had traveled very far. The joking pictures is, hey, they had camels. Because whenever you go far, you're going to have camels. They probably had horses. They probably had a lot of supplies with them and a lot of silver or gold or whatever they used as currency back then to pay their way as they went throughout the lands following a star. Now, when I started my weight loss journey, I followed plans. I structured a dietary plan of what I should be eating, what I could eat, how many calories a day. That was the trick. And then I tried to fill up as much volume as I could in those calories. So lots of fruits and vegetables and things that were low in calorie, right? And that was basically my story. And then I had, water that became a new routine, and then other things like shakes and good stuff like that, and then energy products. So there were a lot of things that really, really transformed my thinking through the research and studying that I did. And so my level of faith was solid in my plan because I completed it, right? The things that I wanted to happen, running a half marathon at the end of those 6 months, all of those things happened, and it was pretty amazing. The wise men are following a star. They're following a star. Now, there's a prophecy attached to this, and there is something going on with the star because they keep going and going and going. And this star eventually does lead them to Jesus. And so their faith is much greater than mine because they are following God's best plan for their lives. And they knew together, the three of them knew this, that plan was to follow God's star, to follow this star no matter what. No matter what came, no matter what happened, no matter what, they were to follow this star. And so if you and I take a look at the story of faith of the wise men, we know we can learn a couple of things right off the bat from this. First of all, acting out on your faith won't look like a normal thing in our world today. We know that. Hence the idea of faith, this belief that our hero, Jesus, is not going to fail us. And they believed that God was not going to fail them. They had faith that God was good and that God loved them and that this was the path they were supposed to be on. They believed that in their heart and in their mind, and so they stepped forward. And so we have to understand that there were probably conversations around the wise men, maybe with their family, maybe their wives, maybe their friends, maybe other wise men, other leaders. So let me get this straight. You guys are setting off to follow a star. Okay. That sounds interesting, right? Should we remove the term wise men? No, these guys went. What was the payoff? They met Jesus face to face, the Son of God, sent to earth to save mankind from their sins. They had an audience with Jesus because of what they did. So the payoff was great, but the risk was enormous. So understand, it doesn't take great faith if there is no risk. I'll repeat that again. It does not take great faith if there is no risk. And so the way that we look and appear to the people around us when we live out a life of faith is not going to be a normal thing in any way, shape, or form. Secondly, the journey may be confusing at times. The journey may be confusing at times. And you may need to dig into the Word and pray deeply, right? That may be part of the process for you. So understand the journey, you may be on roads that are not so good. And you may come across characters on that journey that make it even more confusing, like this King Herod. And this King Herod, one of the wise men, as he comes to them, he says, well, come and tell me about this Jesus when you meet this Messiah. I would like to go and meet him myself. Herod sounds like a nice guy, but an angel of the Lord appears to the wise men and says, hey man, I need you to make a turn at Smith and Berkshire Street and go the other way. All right, I need you to loop the castle. All right, you got to loop the castle. You got to go on the outside of the castle because you can't do it. You can't do it because this guy is jacked up. So we're not going to go there. You just stay away from this dude. And they believed it. But the confusing character of the king inserts himself into this story, who's a genocidal maniac who starts slaughtering baby boys 2 years old and younger per his soldiers just to find Jesus and kill him because he thought Jesus was going to take his throne. This is who folks are dealing with back in these days. Talk about a hard leader to follow. I mean, we don't have a clue here in America what it's like to live under that type of regime, right? And this is the king out there committing genocide against babies, like live babies. Soldiers are killing them. This is what's going on or about to happen. But the wise men, hence they're wise men, followed the instructions of the angel and they went the other way. And I'm sure they were confused at other points in their journey too, like, hey, I mean, did they look over and say, hey, listen, Barry, why are we following this star? Do you ever wonder, like, I mean, how far are we actually going to go? I don't know. Like, they don't have technology and satellites to pull in the data to say, oh, this star is going to lead you to right here. They're just on horses or on their feet. And they're just like, well, we got to go. Let's do this thing. And I bet anything, that journey was one they never forgot. They always talked about and filled them with great joy, not just because of the payoff, but because of the journey. Because they went with this hope as they put one foot in front of the other and did this hard thing. And you see, the Bible is full of these stories of people doing hard things. And our lives are full of these stories of people doing hard things. And they don't make sense to the world. And that's okay. And they get confused along the way. And that's okay. And they, in their heart, sometimes want to turn back. And that's okay. All of that's okay because we're still put one step in front of each other in this journey of faith. Just like the wise men did 2,000 years ago. And you have to ask yourself this question. What kind of a journey are you on right now? Are you even on a journey? Is life just coming to you and you're just like, hey, I'm just dealing with it one day at a time? Or are you actually putting one foot in front of the other and going somewhere? God does not intend for us to stop living during COVID. God does not intend for us to jump off the path of his best plans for our life just because of a virus. I am sorry. This virus is minuscule in importance when we talk about what God's best is for our lives. It's minuscule is what it is. This should not be an overwhelming thing for our lives. And we need to take a step back and ask ourselves today, what is God's purposes and plans for our lives? What is the giftedness he has given me in my life with, and what do I need to be doing with that? And how do I step forward in this idea? My friends, it is extremely important right now that we have this faith, a purpose-filled faith in God and his path for us. And we move forward on this path with our gifts, our strengths, with tenacity, like the wise men. And we keep following the star. But you and I can't follow the star if we're not going anywhere. And we need to be going somewhere, just like the wise men. I mean, there's a season for everything, But I truly believe the season for us sitting here doing nothing is not what it's supposed to be. Binge watching everything and staying safe in our homes. Okay, stay safe. Don't turn this into something else. Stay safe, right? Be smart. But it doesn't mean you are not living your life and engaged in others. I got a message from a friend of mine, and he was sharing a little bit of a story with me about the church. And I would encourage myself and all of us to get engaged in the church, in the body and the fellowship of believers, whatever that looks like today for you. I think that's part of the journey. And where we're sitting right now, we're not supposed to be isolated. There are ways to not be isolated. It might mean Zooming. It might mean going to coffee and sitting 6 feet away from somebody and talking loud at a big table, right? It might be something different. Be engaged with each other. That's part of your purpose, is that community of Jesus coming together, rallying together around him and his goodness and his plans for our lives. But I think from today we can learn from the wise men. The story of faith, it won't look normal. It won't. It won't look like something people would really even approve of many of the times that we share it or we're living it out. Our story of faith is unique to us, driven by the Holy Spirit in our hearts, manifested by the truth of God's word, and empowered by Jesus and his sacrificial act for us 2,000 years ago. We celebrate his birth this month because it is good, it is true, and it is right. And as we celebrate, let's remember there is a reason. There is a reason we are here. There is a purpose to it. And yes, it's to proclaim the gospel, but it's also to move forward in our gifts and to have the faith to take this step on our journey today. Will you do it, my friends? Will you take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to live a reactive life anymore. I'm going to live proactively today and get moving on this journey. I think it's an important time. I think it's an important time to do such things. And I hope you do. And I thank you for joining me on episode 326 of the Thadcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this with a friend or on social media, or leave a comment on our Facebook group. Tell me what you thought. I hope it gave you some motivation and inspiration for your week. And I hope that you would go online and do a review or a rating on iTunes. That always helps me out. All right. But I'm just glad you're here spending time with me here today. And we'll see you tomorrow. Well, we won't see you unless you're on YouTube with me, right? We're on YouTube, by the way. Somehow that's happening. Nobody really watches on YouTube, but you're all listening on your device, and that's great. That's great. Well, thank you again for joining me here on episode number 326, where we're talking about faith, my dear friends. And I pray that your faith is purposeful and motivated today. And until next time, may you be blessed.